Hey, it's Meg. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing day 3 of the Junk Journal July challenge. The prompt is fold, and I'm going to do this in a couple of different ways, but I just wanted to remind you that we have the collaboration, and the lovely Kelsey Lee over at My Abiding Journal is sharing her take on the prompt today. So you'll find her video and the playlist linked down below in the description box. So when I thought of fold, I was thinking of obviously the different papers that we fold into our journals, sort of like tip-ins. And as I was sorting through the papers that I wanted to use within this page, I found that I'd started cutting out some circles from some just brown paper packaging when I was doing some jelly printing. And I thought, well, that was perfect because I'm kind of interpreting this in another way here. So what I'm doing is folding the paper in half and then cutting out these circles, or kind of wonky circles, more like. And then what I'm doing is using that as a little DIY stencil. So it's a really great way to upcycle some packaging and to use it in a different way. And then I've just got a coloured pencil here. I'm using a Caran d'Ache, but you can literally just use anything. It doesn't have to be fancy. And then I am just tracing and using this as a stencil on my page. So I picked a colour that does show up on my page but is a lot more subtle, and I really liked the way that it was able to add a background layer to my page and started the ball rolling with how I wanted this page to be laid out, but it didn't detract too much from covering up what I already had on the page. So I overlaid it onto the postcard that I was working on in yesterday's video. And so with this no-sew style, I was able to carry over some of the visual interest from yesterday's page and start working on that with the page that I'm working on now. So it was quite therapeutic actually to just trace around these like wonky circles. You could of course do different shapes if you wanted to do something like this in your own journal. You could do squares, you could do stars, all sorts of different shapes. The principle is very easy. You just obviously fold the paper in half, cut out half of the shape that you would want, and then when you open it up, you get the full result. And sometimes because, well, when I was doing these circles, obviously I was like misjudging how like arched I wanted it to be. They came out different sizes, but I actually think that that actually makes for a really cool background because, you know, I could use a stencil that has all these uniform circles on them, and that would look cool as well. But this way it's unique and no one's going to have the same stencil as me. So that was the start of my page. So even though you can't immediately see that I've used the fold prompt when you just look at the page as it is now, that was one of the ways I sort of used a technique to interpret the fold prompt. And then just to add some interest, I wanted to add some stitching because I wanted to add a bit of a pop of colour here because everything was quite neutral, and I knew I wanted to add a focal image, but I thought before I do that, I wanted to just add some details. So I used this thread here that's actually quite a bright pink, but I think in the context of all the softer pinks, it really contrasts nicely on this page. And I didn't do anything fancy. I literally just did a few stitches in a straight line across the different papers, and I really like the effect that this gives. You could of course get a little bit more intricate, but I tend to just do like crisscrosses and straight stitches, and it still adds that level of detail that I really love on a page. You know, it gives that textural effect and having that mixed media effect as well on my page. So you'll just see I'm just adding that back and forth there on this page. And then obviously because this is a no-sew, the stitching will show up on the other side of this page. So it's actually quite interesting then once I get round to working on the other side of this page later on in the month for this journal, I'll have to decide then whether I want to incorporate that, like, you know, leave it as a feature of the page, or whether I just cover it up entirely. You know, it doesn't really get in the way. You could just put some collage papers over the back if you didn't want it to show through, but I think that's half the charm of a no-sew journal like this, is that you can have an effect like this. So you'll see here on the reverse, I've got the stitching showing through there, and I just think that that looks really fun. So I'm just tying it off here and trimming the edges, obviously, because I don't want thread going everywhere. Though I do love when I see people doing machine stitching in their journals and they have like the some of the threads like hanging out of pages. I do think that that's a really fun effect. So for my focal point, I'm using this really large botanical image. It's absolutely beautiful, and I'm fussy cutting it out here. And what I decided to do was have this go across 2 of the pages, so do like a full page spread. And I really like the way that the image kind of carries us through the journal, because it's quite long and you've got the leaves and the flower kind of carrying us through. So in that way, I think it works really well to have that as a focal point. And the fact that the colour of this, it's quite a bright, vibrant green, and I think that really pops against the neutral background that I've got going on. So there's no competing. It really like stands out against everything else that I've got going on for the page. And I think it helps to have that focus, because otherwise everything would kind of blend a bit together. So having that lifted off the page, I think really helps with the layout as a whole. So there's no real fold element here. I mean, if I really wanted to stretch it, I could say that the plan was, having the image across both pages, because you fold in the middle of my page. But I definitely think that would be stretching it just a little bit too far. So that's not part of this prompt. It's just part of the page that I'm building as a whole. And I think that's the really interesting part about using prompts sometimes, is that you can make the prompt like the entire focus of the page, or you can literally just use it as the starting off point or as one small element of your page. And if that's what's like spurred you on and helped you to create that page, and then you've gone off and done something like almost completely different, but that's how you got started, then I think that's a win. So feel free to use the prompts in whichever way works for you, whether it's doing just a tiny little element and making it a small part of your regular page, or whether you want to go to town and do everything related to the prompt. It's completely up to you and how you want to interpret it within your journal pages, however works with the way that you work, because I like to do like collage, but you might be doing a lot more paint and very much more mixed media style. So it's just about how you can make the prompts work for you when you're using them in your journaling, and to just have fun with them. Now, I will say the only drawback when I'm adding fussy cut flowers like this to my pages is that it's really, really difficult to add the glue on the back of. As you'll see here, I'm trying to fight with making sure that I don't like break off one of the stems. I've definitely done that before, where I've put the glue on and just sort of taken half the flower with me, and then I've had to gently piece it back together on the page. And luckily you can't always tell that I've sort of torn it in half, and made it look like it never happened in the first place. So I'm just adding it here onto the page and just gently adding it over the fold, especially to make sure that it sticks nicely, because I don't want it to buckle almost in the middle when I fold the page. So I'm just making sure that all the edges are glued down with my trusty Pritt Stick glue stick, which is my absolute go-to. I find that most things stay stuck when I use one of those, so I'm just making sure I pay close attention to all of the edges. And then here, where I only had a small part of the leaf going over to the other page, I just decided to trim it, because I didn't want to deal with it constantly coming off, because there's not enough to wrap around the other side of the page. And then I'm carefully folding it so that the center fold is nice and crisp, so that there's no buckling, like I said, of the image as it goes across from one page to the other, and just making sure that all areas are stuck down nice and securely. It was kind of difficult to get the glue to go in the middle of the flower there, but I managed to get it down nice and smoothly. And before I add my next fold element to this page, because I did do a second part where there's a more obvious fold on this page, I decided to opt for some stamping just to add some detail and some smaller areas of interest across this page. So just on the top there and on the bottom. I did also stamp it on an area where I had like leftover of a vellum envelope, but the ink didn't really adhere to that very well, so it's a little bit muddy in that area. But for my second part of using the prompt of fold, I actually included this envelope. So I attached it where the page obviously folded over to the next side, and I had the flap of the envelope on one side, which I will use for this page here, and then I had the rest of the envelope then on the other page for the next day's prompt to use in whichever way I fancied once I arrived at doing that page's prompt. And so I just stuck it down with some pink washi tape and then had that sort of different shape page here as my little fold out area for using on this side of the page. And I actually found that it was a really nice way to be able to add a quote to my page. So I used my favorite Tombow brush marker to add the quote, and being able to lay the journal flat was a bonus for being able to add this into the page without having any bulkiness underneath. And so I just lettered a Henry Matisse quote that says, "There are always flowers for those who seek them," which I think went nicely with the imagery that I had on this page as well. And so I really enjoyed putting this page together and being able to come at the prompt from different angles and arriving at a really nice place. I think I really enjoyed, even though I didn't add like loads of stuff to this page, I think it still turned out really nicely because I had that background already of the No-So journal. And I think that's probably another thing that's really fun about the No-So journal is that you almost have a pre-made patchwork background. So if you don't feel like doing a background for one of the days of the prompts, then you've kind of got it already ready-made and you can just add a few bits and pieces on top. Like I literally did a little bit of stenciling. I added that big image, some stitching, and then an envelope. Like I didn't add much to this at all, but it looks like more than it is, and I think that I really enjoy that, especially for a daily challenge like this where I can just do quick and easy pages, but they still look effective and have lots of impact. And then, as I said, being able to interpret the prompt in different ways and having that interest on my pages. So I hope you enjoyed journaling along with me, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.